going through round character, which sounds like it's a ton of words. You're starting with anti-hero on page 26, the next page in the core syllabus. At the bottom, it's types of characterization, and so you have indirect, direct, static characters. The last of that grouping is round character, so it's not that you're going A through R. You're doing the next set of terms, but rather than stop partway through characterization, just finishing it off. So next Wednesday, the literary term quiz number 2. We do it every Wednesday. It's going to go through round character. You have 20 terms next week. You don't have 20 new words, but you're going to have some repeats from list number 1. Once you have a term, it could theoretically show up on any list thereafter. So you could have antithesis 10 times. You won't, but in theory you could. So the old ones, especially the ones where you look at it, you go, how do you say antimetaboly, and what does that really mean? If there are any that you feel that you're shaky on, yeah, I would keep them in a file where you kind of go through them over and over again. I would think at this point, allusion, alliteration, you probably don't have to remind yourself of every single week, but they can certainly still show up. So the ones where you feel a little maybe iffy on, still go through with those so that you're familiar with it. There's never going to be a monster list that we're going to do where, okay, you got 140 terms to go, where you have to match all of those. And the format stays the same the whole way throughout, just the point value changes. Next week is 20. That's the most you ever have at one time. You'll have some others where you're 20. You'll have some others where 15, 16, 18, whatever the case. But it'll be between generally 15 and 20. The literary term quizzes people tend to like because you generally do well on them. You get through this week, things get better. You got your final kind of reading quiz on Friday. November technically doesn't start till next week, but I kind of think, or till Tuesday, but we'll say Monday's like November. November, I don't want to call it an easy month, but it's a much more relaxed month, I would say, than what was going on the last few weeks. You still got your literary term quizzes every week, so you need to take care of business with those things, but they add up. Through the course of November, you're probably going to add about another 70 quiz points. Probably somewhere in that ballpark, towards your quiz grade. So I don't want to say it'll counteract, if you have 3 bad quizzes with Thoreau and King and whatnot, but they're good quizzes to have. Your assigned readings are basically your independent reading book. Now, you do have to pace yourself. Don't wait until November the 7th to crack open that book and then start reading and working on your journals. Once you're done with Wollstonecraft, I'd start kind of, beginning this weekend with it. But that's really your reading assignment in November. We're going to be taking care of some other stuff in class while you are working on that. So I think you'll find it to be at least a little bit more relaxed. Just don't procrastinate and push everything off, because then you'll have a repeat of frantic times and moments which you don't really want.
You still suggest that you make it have to do the book at that certain point, even though if you shifted the dates around?
Yeah, for your journals, you still need to be halfway, through the book. I was fearful that if we had it for next Friday, next week would be too much of a cram. So I would say, if a person were to start reading, let's say this weekend, I think that would still give them plenty of time for November 11th to get those through. Keep in mind, you do have, I would certainly want to be halfway through the book by the 9th. So that gives me a couple days to kind of plan what I want to do for my independent reading journal. You do have, remember what are the 2 days, the 7th and the 8th, I think, that Monday and Tuesday, you don't have school those 2 days. So you'll have that 4-day weekend. Your homework assignment for me is make sure you're good with independent reading. So even if you do wait until this weekend to get started with the books, I think you still have enough time to get halfway through. But yeah, the sooner the better. I don't remember if it was this period or another one. Someone asked, can I be more than halfway through my book, when I do my journals? Sure. I mean, you can be done with it. It's not like you have to keep your arguments to the first half. You can read as much as you want. Sometimes you have a book where you like it and you keep reading. So if that's the case with your independent reading book, keep on going.
Okay, so both journals can be open on the whole thing?
Yeah, if you want them, they can be, sure. But the requirement is you have at least the first half. But yeah, if they're beyond that, that's no problem. I'm not gonna. How dare you go ahead and read?
Yeah, I didn't know if the first one specifically had to be the first time.
No. That's just where we want you at least to be. All right. So Friday, the Wollstonecraft quiz, and that one, remember, is going to be 20 points, and then your literary term quiz next Wednesday for list number 2, and again, that's going through round character. That is on that page, number 27. You got this sheet when you came in, and we're going to kind of go over this now, just to give you some kind of context for what would be going on with Mary Wollstonecraft. I'm going to be under the assumption that really hardly anybody, if anybody, heard of Mary Wollstonecraft prior to. Here's his reading assignment. Go. If anyone's taking Euro, AP Euro, she'll probably come up, I would think, at some point throughout the course of the year. But she is British. She's from Great Britain, so she's certainly not an American historical figure that we really look at. She is fairly popular and well known in her day, and then there's about a 150-year period where nobody likes her because English teachers give too many reading assignments about her. Not really. But it's not until about the 1960s that she starts to kind of become a popular, or at least well-known character again, or not character, but person again. The background that we're doing here so far is dates. This is beyond her timeline because she is born in 1759 and she dies in 1797. So certainly 1815, 1832, 1848 that you have at the bottom is going to go beyond her timeline. But really I want to kind of take a look at the era in itself that she lives in, because this era, beginning with 1776 and moving forward, is kind of considered an era of revolt and reform. And so these dates are going to tie in with that idea about revolts and reform taking place, or you could even put, revolutions occurring. And if we were to take the date 1776 and go, hey, any revolutions or reforms come to mind, I think you might think of some. That's for. Do you know that?
No.
Sorry. I don't know where to go with that. Okay. Are you really kidding? How about 1789? Not the American Revolution, still a revolution. Ooh. Did you feel like you had to say that now, just to validate? Besides going, one took place in America and one took place in France, how would you differentiate between the two? Like what would, from a philosophical standpoint, from a what we're revolting about, and there's multiple, what would be some differences between the two, Michelle? Okay, might not have been as purposeful as folks were hoping for with it. I mean, still trying to accomplish something, but in the end did not work. And really, 1815 kind of is considered the end of the French Revolution with the end of the Napoleonic Wars.
Yeah, I guess what Michelle said, the American Revolution kind of managed to establish a country in France and it really succeeded in that.
Okay, so here we go. This establishes a nation. Some folks would argue this established total and utter chaos for about 25 years.
The goal of the American Revolution was independence, and the goal of the French Revolution was just it's a class struggle.
Okay. Who versus whom, I guess, for the class struggle? It's generally, you pretty much have the poor or the lower class versus the aristocracy taking place, the monarchy in France. American Revolution, when you think of founding fathers, leaders of the American Revolution, what are names that come to mind? My hearing sounds bad. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams. From a class standpoint, those people are all wealthy, elite. I mean, they're pretty much aristocrats. The American Revolution, yes, we love it for the holidays and hot dogs and hamburgers and all that kind of stuff. But whereas this one is poor versus the aristocracy, this one is pretty much aristocrats versus aristocrats. Not saying that the lower class are not involved, because they certainly are, but at its foundation, there's a definite difference as to the struggle that is taking place. And I think that's where, with the French Revolution, it does become more chaotic. And I would say throughout Europe, this is the one that people are terrified about. In Great Britain and London, they're not really talking about this anymore. They're talking about this one, because what if the commoners do kind of revolt? Oh no, this could happen here again. You know, guillotines, reign of terror, and all those kinds of things. So this French Revolution really is a terrifying period for a lot of people within Europe. And it's a main point of emphasis when it comes to philosophical debate, governmental debate, and then even some gender things, which Wollstonecraft is going to get into. Wollstonecraft writes A Vindication of the Rights of Woman in 1792. So it is very close to this time period, or to that event happening with the beginning of the French Revolution, and it is definitely influenced by it pretty strongly. Thank you. 1815, I kind of already mentioned this. This is considered really where the French Revolution comes to a close. You have French monarchy is restored. Emperor Napoleon no longer is going to be in control. My handwriting's terrible. It's like Menachie. I had a good run for about like a week back in September. And I've kind of,
last year, maybe.
about 3 years ago.
Whenever I first saw your handwriting, I thought that like it honestly like
It looks like it like automatically like changes
it to like a font. That's actually right.
I'm my own font.
I like it. I like your font.
It'd be nice if the letters actually meant something. I'm going to skip 1832. Anyone want to take a guess? 1848, publication. We associate it more with political change. It's not meant to be nearly as political. You've heard of the document. It's a manifesto.
Oh.
It's the Communist Manifesto of 1848. Marx and Engels. Luke, I tried to do purposely better on that one. A little bit. Remember last year when I messed around with like the little convert my to text? Yeah, that backfired. It would never recognize my handwriting. Communist Manifesto. Anyone identify like really what group of people this is geared toward? Because when you say Communist Manifesto, people start to go anvil, sickle, Russia, Soviet Union, Cold War, but really it's geared more toward really. Who said communists? I thought it was him. So this one's geared more towards the working class, taking, getting a little bit more respect and being able to have a little bit more influence. 1832, this is the $15,000 bonus question. This one actually deals, this is Great Britain with the Great Reform Act. Not to be confused with the Reform Act, because this is the Great one. What a dumb name. Anyone know what the Great Reform Act does? You copied off of that one. Great Reform Act deals with Parliament. What happens is the seats in Parliament are pretty much controlled by, again, the aristocracy, the nobles. The Great Reform Act gives more opportunity. I shouldn't really say power yet, but it gives more opportunity for seats in Parliament to be open up to common areas. You have a lot of cities that before, when Parliament was first designed, really were not going to be represented because people weren't living there. As the Industrial Revolution continues to develop and manifest itself, your population distribution changes. So rather than having just the aristocracy from the wealthy areas being in Parliament, you're getting more of a commoner influence. I'd say the balance of power still resides with kind of the old school, but you're at least getting a little bit more influence taking in. Reason for going over all these dates is you can at least see over roughly this 60, 70 year time period, 75 years almost, that you have a lot of reform taking place where people are starting to look at things differently. And so that becomes a good environment for someone like Mary Wollstonecraft to start to get her ideas out there, because generally in the years prior, if she were to be alive 50 years before and she tries to publish a vindication of the rights of women in 1750 and 1742, she's not going to get any audience for it whatsoever. So in some ways, her lifespan was at a good time when people would be listening to her and considering her ideas a little bit more. Rousseau I'm not going to talk about quite yet, but Edmund Burke is an Irish political figure, philosopher. He writes a pamphlet entitled Reflections on France in 1789. And basically, Reflections on France, and basically denounces the French Revolution. French Revolution is bad. Monarchs should remain in power. People are, you have divinity from above to be in power. The common man cannot revolt against. It will throw the whole system off. In 1790, a person publishes a response to this idea and goes, "You nitwit." It's called A Vindication of the Rights of Men. Calls them out. No, men, and specifically men in Great Britain, have rights that they should be able to, for lack of a better word, vindicate, should be able to argue for. It's not that people are predestined to be powerful or predestined to be poor. Education is a means, is a way in which people can validate who they are. And it gets a very nice round of applause from most of the critical thinkers of the time. People like it.
Who wrote that?
Mary Wollstonecraft.
Oh, wait.
It's not the one that you have.
Oh.
It's not the one that you have. But in 1790, and it's a pamphlet, it's like an essay, she publishes A Vindication of the Rights of Man. It is very popular. People widely hail it, accept it. This is very good stuff. The popularity of it also gets determined by how many times you have to keep printing something. You print off so many copies. We sold them out, so now we need to do a second printing. So for this one, they do a second printing. The second printing has one small change to it that the first printing does not. She did not change grammar, spelling, ideas, or anything like that, but the front cover has an addition to it. You want to take a guess what happens on the second one? Her name. The first one's published anonymously. The second one says, A Vindication of the Rights of Men by Mary Wollstonecraft. And guess what happens to the response? What a terrible idea. No, you should not be. No, you wouldn't know anything about this, you woman, you. So certainly the gender bias starts to come in where initially it is hailed and then it is basically panned as being, no, there's nothing respectable about this. In 1791, another pamphlet gets published entitled, and you might have heard of this one, The Rights of Man. You have heard of the author, TP, not toilet paper. Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine publishes The Rights of Man, and by no means does he plagiarize what Wollstonecraft did before, okay? But the ideas are very, very similar. Whereas this one gets struck down, Rights of Man by Thomas Paine, using a lot of the same philosophy, ideas, viewpoints, gets that big round of applause again. stretch. So Burke throws out this idea. Wollstonecraft goes, no. People go, that's good. And then she publishes it again with her name. That's bad. Thomas Paine publishes a similar idea, and folks go, that's good. So that certainly ticks off Wollstonecraft, which then in the following year, this is when she publishes in her book form, Vindication of the Rights of Woman, where now she is taking a look at some gender issues. She's not arguing for political equality. She's not arguing for change of laws and things like that. What she basically is throwing out there is, hey, men and women come from the same biology, the same makeup. We should be viewed in similar ways. If men are able to get educated, then women should be able to get educated. So she's looking for more social reform than political reform so far as the right to vote, representation in government, and things like that. And the main reason she's worried about those things are that females don't have a whole lot of options when it comes to what they can do with their lives in 1792. It pretty much boils down to like 3. Some would argue 4. One would be that women could get married. And then the job at that point is to produce
Kids.
not just any kids, an heir
Male heir.
and a spare. And that would mean male for both. I mean, that's the line of the day. You need to have 2 boys so that the family name can continue. It's not common, but a husband could file for divorce in 1792. A wife cannot file for divorce in 1792. Legally, a woman at that point, female, has absolutely 0 legal rights. If a husband is to find her or his wife to be unfaithful, be in prison, could have the marriage, annulled. If physical abuse takes place, people aren't really going to pay much attention to it. If a wife is to find that her husband has been unfaithful, she has no recourse whatsoever. I mean, it's her marriage. That's where she's at. And a marriage really is more of a property settlement between the father and this to-be husband more than anything else. So legally, she does not have any options. If she does not get married, if she remains single, then must live with a male relative because she cannot own property. So she's probably either going to be with her father or she's going to be with her brother. Guess who really is unhappy if she lives with the brother? The brother's wife. Because it's not going to be, hey, there'll be more help around the house. This is one more mouth to feed. This is one more person that have to take care of. So that's not a situation that's going to be, too good. And then the third option, unfortunately, is prostitution. Some could also throw in the fact that you could join a convent, but that's kind of further on down the list. So the options are not there, and really what Wollstonecraft believes should be an option is education, so that women can have more of a role within society, a higher role within jobs, can be productive members. She's not arguing yet that they should be able to divorce their husbands or whatnot, but she simply wants there to be an opportunity for education because this would then be a benefit for society as a whole. So she does call out men, certainly within the piece, but the big part that she goes after, a group that she goes after, are women who have access to education, well-to-do women, women who have access to knowledge, books, things like that, but simply don't want to pursue it and would rather be busy producing the heir and the spare. And that's really where she holds a lot of resentment. One of the names that she also throws in there quite a bit is going to be Rousseau, and she is dead fast against Rousseau. They would kind of be like the arch nemesis of one another. Rousseau writes a thing called the social contract, which basically explains how men should be trained and ready for government. He puts this into a novel form, into a book entitled Emile. It's about a guy named Emile. Emile has a wife, Sophie, and Sophie's job is to trick Emile into thinking he is happy. basically make him think marriage is a good thing. And that is the education of Sophie, to keep Emile happy. So basically her education, her purpose in life, her training is to have a happy husband. Rousseau, and remember Charles Colson when we did the same-sex marriage? He was the one who was involved in prison ministry and put marriage in quotation marks. He was worried about marriage falling apart. Him and Rousseau would have similar ideas, where Rousseau is worried that marriage will, if people don't honor marriage or think that they want to be married, that the world is certainly going to fall apart. So Rousseau thinks that women should trick men into being happy, because if they realize that they are stuck with one woman, basically is the way that Rousseau would be putting this, they're not going to be happy. Which is certainly where you start to see the male biased, chauvinistic views starting to take place, and this is where Wollstonecraft is really going to go off. A word that Wollstonecraft is going to use quite a bit is sensibility within a vindication of the rights of women. She doesn't mean sensibility in the sense of reason. She's referring to sensibility in the sense of emotion. And certainly, this stereotype still exists today. Women are more emotional than men. Is that true? Who knows? But Luke would say yes. But it's Luke, so what are you going to expect?
So I did it right.
Did you write 11 out of 11 at the top of your literary term? No, okay. One of the arguments that Rousseau throws out there is the female nervous system is more sensitive than the male nervous system, so events have more of an emotional impact on women than men do, or than they do on men. So when she's referring to sensibility, she's kind of referring to the claim that women are going to be more emotional at all the times, and in a lot of ways she does not really follow through with that and think that's going to be true. So that sensibility word kind of, I think, drives people, not drives people, but confuses people a little bit. She's dealing more with emotional responses than anything else. So this is kind of the environment that she's growing up in, that she's dealing with, that she's living in, and so that's certainly going to drive some of the ideas that she has. On the back of the sheet, there were just some dates here that were thrown down, and we're not going to have too much time to get through all of them. I bet you can figure out what happened in 1759. She was born, and I bet you can even guess where.
England.
I bet you can even be more specific. London, yeah. So 1759, she's born in London. Her family's middle class. They're not filthy rich by any means. Dad has a business. Dad squanders the money, though, so that causes a little bit of an issue. But Wollstonecraft really gets her education by being a governess. Remember the importance of being earnest, and you had, what was her name? I think it was Prism. Was the governess for Cecily, and the importance of being earnest. Basically, she's a tutor. That's what Wollstonecraft does. She's a tutor for a wealthy family, and it gives her access to books, to knowledge, to things to read. She gets along very well with the parents, and so she's able to become more of a writer. So 1790 is when we have that vindication of the rights of men. 1792 is when Woman gets published. 1793 in Paris, she meets a guy by the name of Gilbert Imlay. He's really from the U.S., so his name's probably Gilbert, but in Paris you gotta be Gilbert. And she falls madly in love. They have a child. Fanny is born in 1794. In 1795, she realizes that Imlay is estranged from his wife, but is still married. She goes through deep depression. This is Wollstonecraft. She attempts suicide 2 times and ends up, being able to break free from the relationship. They are never married, but she does have a daughter. In 1795, she does get married to a guy named William Godwin. I'm sorry, in 1796, gets married to a guy named William Godwin, who she had met before. And then they have a daughter, Mary Shelley, is what we know her as, author of Frankenstein in 1797. Wollstonecraft dies 10 days after giving birth to Mary Shelley. Complications from childbirth, medical procedures clearly are not as good, back then as they were today. 1798 is then when she runs into a rough patch. She's already deceased. her husband publishes a book entitled Memoirs, and in that book is when he makes public all the private issues that happened with him lying with his illegitimate child, with the depression, with suicide. He does it in a quote-unquote lovingly manner. But that causes public outcry that therefore her credibility is shot, and that's what causes kind of an anti-Wollstonecraft view for roughly 150 years. So if you're going to get married to somebody, this is number 2 for the week. We're done.